Alabama escaped South Carolina 27-25. And we've now seen back-to-back weeks from the Alabama Crimson Tide where they look vulnerable. And really for the last 2.5 games, we saw the second half against Georgia. We know that Vanderbilt put 40 up on them in Vanderbilt, the first time that team has ever beat a number one ranked team. And now they are struggling with the South Carolina Gamecocks. And this is crazy to watch Alabama go through. You're in Tuscaloosa. It feels like this is a get right game. But when you're in the SEC and when you feel like you're in these trap games when your team might be kind of reeling, there isn't necessarily a free game in the SEC. And if you're a fan of college football, you know exactly what I mean by that. So on a scale of 1 to 10, really, what is the panic meter right now for Alabama after they played their last 2.5 games like this? I'm putting it at a solid 7 because, again, we saw against Vanderbilt, we saw against Georgia, the secondary is absolute Swiss cheese at times, and it feels like it's not really solid at the critical points in the game that it needs to be. You see that Carson Beck was 5 for 17 on deep throws. Georgia knew that they had a secondary problem. In Alabama, it was the most times ever in the Kirby Smart era that 17, that many throws, 17 traveled 20 plus yards down the field. We saw what Vanderbilt did again with those 40 points on that secondary. And, the national numbers wouldn't really suggest that Alabama's not good in the secondary because they are in the top third of the country of total defense, but you've seen what they've been in the last 2.5 games. Now, we know they're going to be in shootouts. There's no question about that. They have one of the best offenses in the country. And when you look at some of the other games that are coming up on their schedule, I think, the game against LSU in a couple of weeks, that's going to be a shootout there. If Missouri decides to come and play, which I believe they will, they've been a solid ranked team all season. And then, if Tennessee decides to wake that offense up this weekend as well and actually give Alabama a run for their money, we know Alabama is going to be in shootouts for the rest of the year because of how their defense is. You have incidents like Malachi Moore happening on the field during the Vanderbilt game, just straight up refusing the leadership and really the superiority, things that we wouldn't see in the Saban days. I don't want to necessarily harp on the Saban era being gone because we know that. Okay, NIL pushed Nick Saban out. That's why Kalen DeBoer's in, and I've been saying that Kalen DeBoer is going to be successful. But there is reason to panic, and the incident like Malachi Moore, it's not something that we would have seen with Nick Saban. If you shut this team down offensively, they're going to struggle because they're going to struggle to stop you. And we see them in the South Carolina game. They come out, they go up 14-0. That defense had Alabama struggling, and it felt like you had Alabama boxed in a corner. You were just waiting for the punch out, the delivery, the blow to be the one to win the fight, to be the one to win that matchup in Tuscaloosa, upset them, drop them even more. But it doesn't play out that way. Once Alabama goes up 14-0, they struggled for points really until the fourth quarter, and it was 2 touchdown runs. Jalen Milroe was efficient, 16 of 23 in this game, but he did throw 2 interceptions, and it feels pretty lucky for Alabama to win this game. Let's just call it what it is, because South Carolina, again, did everything in order to try to deliver that final blow in the matchup, and because at the end of the day, South Carolina, they're not as competent as some other teams in SEC, but they do deserve their place in the conference. Don't get me wrong about that. They did everything they could. They locked up Bama for mostly 3 quarters. They get that crazy onside kick. They benefit from the pass interference to get the insane corner of the end zone touchdown to Nick Harbor. That penalty moves them down the field. They draw up the absolute perfect 2-point try, and they just airmail it to lose the game. If Sellers was just a little bit of a better quarterback and took a little mustard off that ball, don't airmail it as much, you're tying the game with Alabama and you're going to overtime, or at least in that moment you are tied. Okay, we don't know what could have happened after the fact. We saw that South Carolina comes out with a weird game plan. Instead of trying for a field goal, they just throw one up. Alabama picks it, and that's the game. But with South Carolina turning the ball over 4 times, and one of those being the game's final play on the interception, you're not going to win a football game like that. And that's not hard to see. That is something that Alabama will be able to overcome, that Kalen DeBoer does overcome, because they are that pedigree of football team and just a personnel and players. Now, you did see, Alabama's defense tighten up some, but still giving up giving up those 25 points and what could have been 27 to South Carolina. It's just more to be desired. You want to know how Alabama's defense, just in, kind of one stat line, as you know that it's reeling. Alabama is 19 of 33 defensively on third down, getting off the field between Vandy and South Carolina. They are 7 of 8 on fourth downs going back to the Georgia game. Now, that is a bit padded because Georgia did go 5 for 5 on fourth downs in that crazy potential game of the year. They allowed a 36-yard touchdown pass on fourth down versus South Carolina, and it looked great. In terms of the touchdown pass, the Alabama defense did not. 104 rushing yards for Alabama, 4 sacks allowed. The offensive line was just getting pushed around in this game. And this is another indicator. If you get physical with this team, if you push them around, you are going to see people have an advantage on the Crimson Tide. And that feels really weird to say, but this is what Alabama is at this point in the season. It's 3 straight weeks where they're struggling to close it out, where they're struggling to finish ball games. And that is not something we've seen from Alabama in recent years and really over the last decade. I don't mean to compare everything to Saban, but God, Saban, kind of made the Tide what they are, and that's the standard. You don't want to accept anything less. But that was the thing under Nick Saban is they didn't struggle to put their foot on the throat under Saban. That's what made Nick so great. They didn't struggle to put games away. That's what made Nick in Alabama so great. And they had every right, they had every chance in the Georgia game, maybe not so much the Vandy game, but especially the South Carolina game, to put it away. And you just don't have it just doesn't happen. You give up that onside kick that just looks laughable at the time that it happens. I want to say there was a penalty before that I think had the kick retried or something, but it was a crazy game. I love, as a Georgia fan, as you know, to see Alabama get tested in this way. And Alabama's just got a lot of thinking to do. They got a heck of a schedule coming up again. They got LSU, they got Missouri, they're going to play Tennessee. That doesn't even include the playoffs that they're going to walk into. So Alabama does escape South Carolina 27-25. They look shaky for, you could say, their third game in a row, but technically 2.5 games. And we're going to have to see what happens with the Tide as they walk into Tennessee, into Knoxville this weekend. I don't know who I have winning that game yet. It's going to be a really good game. Not here to give a prediction, but I'm very happy to see Alabama and Tennessee at this point in the season because these two teams have kind of reeled back to see what they're actually capable of here.